My name is Logan Kinamore. I'm a fourth year medical student at LSU in New Orleans. Um, I'm going into a combined internal medicine and psychiatry residency program, and so it's a combined training. It's 5 years, and at the end of it, I'll be an internal medicine physician and a psychiatrist, with the ultimate goal of having a large part of my practice consist of addiction medicine and approaching people um, who have substance use disorders from a harm reduction and holistic standpoint. First, I'd like to just talk about some definitions and the way that we talk about drugs and people who use drugs. Um, Addiction is a horrible word. I hate it. I don't think it's very descriptive. It doesn't really capture the nuance and the truth behind um, people's relationships with substances. The use of substances exists on a spectrum, like so many things do. From complete abstinence all the way to the spectrum of problematic and chaotic drug use, right? And there's variations in between. Many people use drugs regularly to the benefit of their own lives. Drugs can be an appropriate coping mechanism. They can also be a form of recreation and blowing off steam. They're in a set of tools for enhancing our lives. What is normally called addiction, I characterize that as someone who has a chaotic or problematic relationship to whatever substances they are using. The key thing in thinking about whether or not a person is experiencing quote unquote addiction is what is their relationship to that substance? What role does it fill in their lives? My own personal story, it doesn't start with like shooting up every day and having a problematic relationship with opioids, which I get to decide is problematic. No one else gets to put that on anybody else. I started drinking when I was in junior high school and like experimented with pot. And a lot of people who are curious and in adolescence, we are more impulsive than we are once our brains are finished developing. There's certain people that just seek out novelty and new experiences. And they want to experience the world and meet new people and do new and different things. And I was one of those people. So a lot of young people who have that attitude toward life will go and try substances because there's so much neurological development that takes place at that time in the development of your brain and your body. My relationship with substances did not start out particularly toxic, but I was kind of I was like a tortured little gay boy. I was in the closet, figuring out what my sexuality was and my gender identity and who I was and who I wanted to be and who and what I desired, right? I just turned 37. And so when I was 14, things were very different as far as representation of queerness in media, acceptance of queerness as a whole. So a lot of the shame around not being brave enough to be authentically who I was is what eventually drove my relationship with drugs to become problematic. So I dropped out of high school when I was 16. I went to Baton Rouge High School in Baton Rouge. I'm from Baton Rouge. And immediately got my GED. I just had no interest in high school. It did nothing for me, right? I wanted to learn other things and experience other things. I would ride the school bus from Sherwood Forest Boulevard in the suburbs of Baton Rouge to Baton Rouge High, which is in mid-city, and then just walk off campus to the city bus station, which is right down the street on 22nd, and just take the city bus to LSU and go hang out with my friends who were in undergrad and do drugs all day. And a lot of it was a lot of fun. I mean, even through the worst parts of my quote addiction, like a lot of it was a lot of fun. And that's another misconception people have about addiction, is that it's just all dark and horrible, and you know, you all you think about is drugs, and you can't grow, you can't learn, you can't love and have relationships. None of that is true. The thing that did happen though was I moved to Leeway, which is actually like the north gates of LSU used to be very different. And so I lived there, and that's where all the like punks and weirdos and queers and poets and like people that did lots of drugs lived. Like, and we had a community. And you know, we took care of one another, but we also did a lot of drugs. And that's where I was introduced to opioids. And you know, the first time I really got high, like ate a bunch of Percocets and felt that feeling that opioids give you, I was like, oh, yes, this makes all of the existential pain go away, not just the physical pain. And then I knew that there were folks down the street who were like kind of beatnik, you know, literary kids, and they shot up morphine. And I was like, if popping some Percocets feels this good, I bet shooting up morphine feels even better. Also, you know, I always read books, and some of my literary heroes at that time were people that, you know, shot up opioids. And that was part of the literary mystique. You know, it was very much romanticized. And so I sought those folks out and convinced them to shoot me up so I could see what it felt like. And that's when my, you know, love affair and relationship with like hardcore opioid use began. And so for the next decade, I proceeded to have this relationship with, you know, shooting up opioids and all the other drugs. But opioids were always my go-to mainstay. And I hitchhiked all over the country and hopped some freight trains and lived in the woods in a lot of different places and met all kinds of people and had an incredible time. It was wonderful, right? I don't regret those experiences at all. Um, there were some experiences at all. Um, there were some dark shit and trauma also. A lot of friends died, you know, along the way. I had a child with my partner, Clover. So we moved back to Baton Rouge and did our best. And he died of SIDS when he was 2 months old, which was an incredibly horrible and traumatic thing, though I don't think directly related to our drug use. After Odin died, we certainly left town, and you know, we just dove into complete oblivion, to the best of our ability, because the pain was too much to bear. I learned a lot. You know, I got beat up a bunch. I got spent time in jail all over the country. Those are some of the, you know, less ideal sequelae of you know, being on the street and living that kind of life. I was living in New Orleans at an art warehouse in, I think it was 2009. And I was working as a stagehand, and I was pretty strung out. I wasn't like using all day every day, but I was getting high a good bit, overdosed a couple of times. And the people that I lived with, like the manager of this huge art warehouse was my friend. And eventually, you know, she kind of knew what was up. And she's like, you have to leave. Like, I can't watch you be like this. Like, I love you, but you have to go. And so I left, and my dog and I took off to travel by ourselves alone. So I went all over, mostly west, but all through the west, all the way up to Northern California and Washington and Oregon and New Mexico, Colorado. And essentially I spent about a year just traveling alone with Lucia and trying to get my shit together. And I wasn't not doing drugs intentionally, but I just couldn't always get them. So, you know, I was drinking, and if I'd find drugs, I'd do drugs, and, you know, did all that. And then traveled with a friend all the way through the High Line down through Ohio, and came back to Louisiana, and just kind of felt like, you know, I wanted to settle down, be more stable for a little while. And my friend that I had known for a long time had just returned to Baton Rouge, after being on the road and traveling for a while. We met at a party. You know, we'd both been back for like a week or two, and we were like, hey, let's get a house together. So we did. Found a little spot, actually right by the LSU lakes. I was working as a stagehand pretty steadily, and he had a really good job. We were still getting high, you know, but we were paying our bills. on time, and our house was relatively clean, and we were just kind of like living a normal life. Um, and then one of my dearest friends, who we had known, we were both opioid users for a long time. She moved back from New Orleans. So Chelsea moved back to Baton Rouge because she had missed a shot and had this awful soft tissue infection in her arm, and like they had to take a big chunk of skin out. And her dad was like, "Come on, you've been in New Orleans for 7 years. Like, move back to Baton Rouge, try to get it together." So she went to this